Welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West, the show where American grit meets British backbone. Tonight's guest needs no introduction on either side of the Atlantic. A man with streets named after him in Ukraine, but a legacy still fiercely debated at home. Despite leaving office more than 3 years ago, he's still on everyone's lips in Britain. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, good evening.
Good evening, Harry. Very good to be on your show again.
Welcome back. Well, this is a new show, but you're back.
Right,
you're here.
fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you for coming. A remarkable turnaround.
It's still your show, though.
It is my show. It's got my name up there. Look. A remarkable turnaround from Donald Trump at the UN this week. He now says that Ukraine can win the war, should win the war, should take back land that it's lost, should defeat the Russian paper tiger. Are you buying this?
Look, I think that we've got to take the president at his word. And I've always argued, I think we've had this conversation before, I think that Donald Trump, sooner or later, was going to realise that Vladimir Putin cannot be trusted and that he's basically pulling his chain and the whole... He did his best at Alaska. You saw what happened. And I think that, there are several things that he said that I think are completely right. So the Russian economy now... going south rapidly, Ukrainians having massive success blowing up these Russian oil gas refineries, right? I think 16 of 38 or so Russian refineries have been hit by the Ukrainians in the last few weeks. Massive impact that's having on Putin's economy, on his war machine. Gasoline production's well down. And so Donald Trump's spot on about what's happening to Putin in Russia. But he's also right in what he's basically saying about what needs to happen next. And you need some European leadership. We need to save the West. The West needs to come together and actually follow the American example.
Why has it taken
on sanctions?
You're a confidant of Donald Trump. You speak to him. You speak to Zelensky. You're intimately still involved in this conflict and seeking peace. Why has it taken the president so long to get to this phase? Is it just Putin, or are we in this scenario that so often happens with this president, where people suspect it's the last person that's spoken to him gets the line out? When he speaks to Putin on the phone, he starts spouting Putin's talking points. When he has a meeting with beaming Zelensky in New York last night, he's talking about Zelensky's lines. Is that fair?
I don't. Well, I mean, Harry, you're a very keen student of all this, and I don't. I think you can see the shift, right?
Yeah.
So from where we were back in the White House in... Was it February?
February, yes.
Which was a pretty low moment, I think.
Pretty nasty scenes there, yeah.
For the Ukrainians, a lot of feeling of misunderstanding. How can you possibly have a moral equivalence between Russia, the invader? How can you blame the war on the Ukrainians? I think we've moved a long way since then. And I think, you're seeing the scales falling from Donald Trump's eyes. I think here's what I think really happened. I think psychologically, I think he was very, very hacked off with the Democrats about Russia.
Yeah.
And he felt that they were basically misrepresenting him when in his first term in office. Remember the Russia hoax?
The Russia hoax. So he's still talking about it now.
He's still talking about that. And there's a certain amount of truth in that, right? His opponents did overdo it.
Yes.
And they
pretended
that the Russians were running him, and that wasn't really true. And I think that made him kind of psychologically more pro-Putin than he would otherwise have been. And,
yes.
And I think he's now basically understood that, this is his instinct, that he cannot allow himself, the President of the United States, the ex officio leader of the free world,
indeed,
to be bested by Vladimir Putin. And he won't allow Ukraine to go down on his watch, and I think we're starting to see that.
Do you think he overcooked it in Alaska? I know he flew the B-52s over Putin's head, but it wasn't exactly staring him down, was it? It was they didn't even do a press conference. There was no ceasefire. He abandoned efforts to have an immediate pause before talks can start. The Zelensky meeting with Putin's never happened. Was it a mistake to try Alaska? Did Alaska get any closer to peace, or was it the right thing to do if it has opened his eyes?
I think it's the last point, Harry. I think that it was just a necessary thing that had to happen. I think he'd been promising himself, he'd been promising the world that with his diplomatic skills, he could somehow get Putin to see the logic of the position, and that clearly hasn't happened. Putin is going to lose, right? He's going to fail, But I think
Sure, you guarantee.
Yeah, I am, but I think
he seems to be holding up pretty well so far. Indians are still buying his oil. Europeans are still buying his gas.
They're buying less. They're buying less. It's very interesting what's actually happening. Putin's fuel sales of oil and gas are the lowest level now since 2020. The lowest level now since 2020. Russian gasoline production's down 20%.
Hot topic of debate about how the West, as you just said, how the Europeans are going to pay for this all. We're talking about seizing Russian assets in the United Kingdom, seizing Russian assets in bank accounts, nice townhouses in Kensington, you name it, it's potentially on their area. Are you in any way concerned that Western inward investment could be jeopardised by the fact that the state is willing to seize private property and hand it over? And yes, it's the Russians this time, but if you were an oil sheikh or a Gulf investor, and there's a fair few of them in this country, wouldn't you be looking at London and thinking, I don't want to buy a house there or put my money in London if in 20 years' time some government who doesn't like us for some reason is going to nick our assets? No,
there's two very different things, and I think it's entirely right for sanctioned individuals to take their assets and so on. That's standard practice. Putin's waging an illegal, criminal, evil, brutal war against an entirely innocent country.
But we still stopped short so far
in the case of Gaddafi's Libya and Saddam Hussein's Iraq, we did the same thing. And actually, in my view, Harry, we haven't gone far enough.
So you'd like to see widespread Russian assets, regardless of whether
there's one particular thing we should do. We should do it, and I think this is actually what Donald Trump is getting. There is $300 billion
sitting
in a bank account, in the Euroclear bank account in Brussels, right? That's a huge.
That'll buy some storm shadows.
That's Putin's money. That which the Ukrainians could certainly use to buy some kit that would help them take out more of the Russian oil production and help them get through this war. Now, there is no reason on earth why we shouldn't take. I think what the president is trying to get at is that this is money that's in a Belgian bank account, right?
Right.
And we are told that the biggest blockers on getting this done are the Belgians. This is Putin's frozen money.
The new Swiss in the Second World War. They saw no trains, they saw no gold.
But you've followed the EU very well. You know perfectly well that in the end, Belgium doesn't call the shots.
Gotcha.
In Europe. We should get this on. And so I think what the US is looking for is European leadership on this. Because if you look at the situation on economic pressure on Putin, which is where we need to go, right? Best way to save the West is to save Ukraine.
Doesn't seem to be working so far, though, does it?
Well, it is.
He's not, because he's taking the piss, isn't he? Not only is he refusing to come to the table in Ukraine, he's now buzzing drones and planes over other European countries that border Russia. This is, Donald Trump said last night we should be shooting these planes down.
Well, I agree.
This is heading for a conflict, right?
No, not if we're strong.
Well, if you're shooting Russian planes out the sky.
The way to be strong now is for Europe to do, after all, what Donald Trump has already done, which is put secondary sanctions on people who buy Russian oil and gas. I mean, he's
put the Germans.
So he's put 53% sanctions on China. He's put 25% tariffs on India. And these are and that is already starting to affect their buying. They're looking for alternatives. Now, my question is to you. I'll give you the answer. My answer to you, is that Europe should do the same. And here we are in London, greatest city on earth, capital of finance in this hemisphere. Why aren't we doing what Trump has done on hydrocarbons?
Do you think?
And how can And he's got a serious point when he says, you Europeans want American leadership, but you're
trying to have it both ways. Just to be clear, though, on the drones, on the planes that are buzzing our borders, you agree with the president we should shoot them down?
Well, I think that what we should do is have a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine.
Policed by the RAF and the French and the Germans and the Italians.
Policed by NATO over Western Ukraine, so that
that's going to drag us into a hot conflict directly with Russia, though, isn't it?
No, you haven't got. I think if you've got drones and missiles coming over towards NATO territory, which is what you've got at the moment, or you had the other day in Poland, I think you should find ways of taking them out.
If you were still the Prime Minister and the call comes at 3 a.m, the red phone rings and they say, we've got a shot, take the shot, we're going to shoot down a Russian fighter jet, you would take that shot? Knowing full well the conflict it could end up.
We're talking about drones and missiles that have been drifting over.
They've been playing. Would you risk a hot conflict with Russia by shooting their assets out of the sky?
Look, what we don't want to see is any further incursions into NATO territory.
But someone's got to punch this guy in the nose, right?
Well, I think we've got the balance about right so far, to be perfectly honest.
Interesting.
I think people said, after the first 19 drones landed in Poland, well, why don't we launch a war with Russia? I don't think that's the right response. I think we should be proportionate, but it's got to stop. And I think the first thing we should be going to is in greatly intensified economic sanctions. And the next, so take the 300 billion. European secondary sanctions.
Which is going to hurt Europe. It's going to push energy prices back up in Europe. It's going to hurt the German economy because they're the ones still trying to have it both ways.
Well, there's 300 billion barrels worth of oil in the Gulf. It's huge. America is the single biggest producer.
On that point,
there's 5. We've got 5 billion barrels ourselves.
You've led me perfectly to Donald Trump's next point.
But the third thing we should do,
go on
quickly, is. What's this about fundamentally, Harry? Is Ukraine part of the West?
Yeah, no,
is it part of the West?
We will get to that.
Let me give you the answer. The answer
20
is
seconds.
We need to send the so-called coalition of the willing
onto the ground
now, because there are plenty of. I'm sure you go to, like me, everybody goes to Ukraine. There are lots of very.
So send in boots on the ground now.
Yeah, because what we need to make clear is that what the Ukrainians have chosen. The Ukrainians have chosen to be a free, Western, democratic country.
British boots on the ground in Ukraine now.
They should have the freedom to invite whomsoever they choose onto their
with all
country
the full risk of that.
And not have that determined for them by the Russians. They don't have to. Before our viewers get the wrong idea, under no circumstances would I be advocating that the coalition of the willing, all those countries...
We're pulling the trigger.
No, absolutely not. So back to your point about the fighter jets. No, we're not going to be engaged in
any more so than we already are.
In war fighting with... because there's a good reason for that. The most effective fighters are the Ukrainians.
They are.
But there's no reason why we shouldn't be there, just to show that Ukraine is a free, sovereign, independent country that can invite whomsoever Ukrainians
wasn't the only thing
onto their own soil.
Wasn't the only thing that Donald Trump talked about yesterday. It was a remarkable speech at the UN. He saved some serious beef, though. State visit's over, got his picture with the king, had his lunch with Keir Starmer, I bet that was fun, moved on, and now he's talking about our suicidal energy policy, our windmills. You agree with Donald Trump on Ukraine, it seems now. Do you agree with him on our suicidal energy policy, our race to net zero, the fact we've turned off the North Sea oil? He's saying drill, baby, drill. He's talking about the beautiful oil fields in the north. You started all this. You stopped all this, right?
Well, I think that actually... we could have a bit more hydrocarbons in this country, and I think that there's no harm in that.
You stopped fracking.
I think so. On fracking, frankly, I'd have loved to, when I was mayor of London, I'd love to have fracked, Lewisham or whatever.
Careful, someone's living there. I get a bit NIMBY now.
But one of the difficulties with fracking in the UK is that I think I'm right in saying that the population per square mile in the United States is about 100 per square mile. In the UK,
you didn't want to rattle windows in marginal seats.
In the UK, it's about 500 or more per square mile. It's a much tougher sell. The other problem is that for fracking is that we in the UK don't have, so as individual citizens in the UK don't have the rights to the hydrocarbons under.
And what about the North Sea, though?
Which they should. We should look at that because it might change attitudes to fracking. The North Sea. The problem with the North Sea is we've got.
Tories have whacked the first windfall tax on them. It's not economically viable at the current extraction rates to even do it. Donald Trump's got a massive point here, hasn't he? We've got this. Look, we've got barrels and barrels and barrels of barrels on our doorstep.
How many barrels do you think we've got till 2050?
Well, it depends how much. It depends what the price of extraction is.
Suppose we extracted everything.
Tell me how many.
It's about 5 billion.
Okay, that's fair.
How many yards do you think there are in the Gulf?
I mean, a lot more than that. That's
About
why they own half of London.
billion,
Yeah.
right? Just in the Gulf. That's before you have Russia, before you have America. So no matter how... So the point I want to make a basic economic point. No matter how much oil we extract from the North Sea, it's a good thing. I mean, we get revenue from it, we'll get tax from it and so on, get jobs from it, but you won't change the price of oil in this country or anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a global... If you get that...
But in basic energy security terms, we should be...
Yes, it won't last very long, but it certainly is. What we should also do is, I think, have much more nuclear.
Yes, you tried that, but I mean, you hit the same roadblocks everyone else.
It is the right thing.
It's taken 25 years to build a nuclear power station.
What I wouldn't do, speaking as somebody who loves this country and wants us to succeed as we can, I would not do what Donald Trump is urging us to do and abandon all...
you love your windmills, don't you?
I would not.
You just bloody love windmills.
Shall I tell you why not? What's he?
They're ugly though. They kill birds.
He's Donald Trump. I don't have the sort of
golf courses.
The general pop. There are a lot of people who seem to get their knickers in a twist about President Trump. I actually get on with him and find there are plenty of things to
talk.
I enjoy. Absolutely right. But he's a salesman. And he's a New Yorker. And so he is. And so when he looks at Europe, and including us, he sees America's the #1 producer of oil and gas at the moment. He wants to sell it.
He just doesn't like his view.
And so on London, I've got to admit, I think Sadiq...
Well, that's what he says London's a dump. He says the mayor is terrible. What's your response to that? Former mayor of London.
Well, London is not a dump. London is...
Tell him, look down the camera. Donald Trump... London is not a dump.
London's the greatest city on earth.
Is it, though?
Of course.
Is it really?
Of course it would have been better.
It's not that safe these days.
It was better in the Augustan era of 2008 to 2016, whatever it was. And crime did come down massively, and we had huge investment in our capital, and we had a wonderful Olympics and so on.
So you're saying Sadiq is a bad man?
I think he's let things go, and I think it's a tragedy. Just seeing the graffiti on public transport on the tube is crazy. The way to stop graffiti is you get it immediately. Because the little egotists, what they want to do is they want to see their
Donald Trump wasn't
marks.
Donald Trump wasn't.
And if you whip it off immediately, they hate it.
Donald Trump wasn't talking about graffiti.
So when I was mayor, we didn't have graffiti on it.
Oh, that's not true. There was
very much. No, Harry, look, you go back.
Oh, come on.
There was far less.
Come and see where I live.
It was far.
All right, but that's not.
But this was 28 to 2016. And we had a very different policy.
Look, that's not the only thing that Donald Trump was talking about. He said Britain has Sharia law. I mean, is that not helpful for the leader of the free world?
I sort of think the United States president speaks sometimes in figures in metaphors I don't recognize. Let me give you an example. I'm slightly starting to think, and maybe this, you and I are based in Washington, right?
Yes.
And I sort of think I've had enough of lectures from the United States about free speech.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've got a problem in the UK. I think some of these people have been jailed for tweets. It's mad, and we shouldn't be doing it. But, I think some good friends of the UK, J.D. Vance, for instance, are inviting us to look at the mote in our own eye without looking at the beam in their own, as the Bible says, right?
Where's the problems in America?
Well, I mean...
You free Jimmy Kimmel.
For heaven's sake, it's not too true. It's not too obvious. But a guy was shot the other day, right? Because he wanted to vindicate the principle of free speech, right? Whatever you may say about our country, we don't have people who advocate free speech being shot.
Touch wood.
Touch wood. But I also think that it's pretty odd to have a primetime TV. I don't know if you know what it is.
Late night TV. Jimmy Kimmel, ABC.
Well, he's the. I'm trying to understand. He's the sort of Harry Cole.
I understand he's a comedian.
He's the Harry Cole of the United States. Is that right?
Funny guy. Yeah.
He's a funny guy.
Apparently.
Anyway, this guy, the finger of the White House reached out, as far as I understand, and mysteriously, was it ABC?
You were never tempted to, pick up the phone and have a go at the BBC?
But we don't operate like that.
No.
How would you feel, Harry,
Vindicated.
if as a result of this show, Keir Starmer was to ring up whatever brilliant organisation controls this, ring up the mission control for Harry Cole Saves the West, and say, enough, Harry Cole.
Well, it's normally Kemi Badenoch that does that with things I write.
Well,
but
anyway.
we'll leave that story for another day.
But the point is a serious one. It would never happen.
I don't know. I've had some pretty big run-ins with the government over my years in this country for things I've written that were true.
Really?
Yeah.
But didn't your editor stick up for
Yes,
you?
because my editors, all of my editors have had, balls of steel. And as I imagine you would have done as an editor, you tell them where to go.
Yeah,
which is what America seems to be doing as well. So anyway,
Yes, but no, right?
Yeah,
So I think so. What I would say is, let's save the West, but let's
learn from each other.
Let's learn from each other, and the crucial thing is not to equate what happens in Britain or America or any of the Western countries, NATO area countries, with what happens in autocracies. Because there you get journalists shot by the regime, right? And you get journalists locked up by the regime. And we've just got to keep a sense of realism about this.
Yeah. You mentioned Charlie Kirk. I don't know if you saw the astonishing scenes in Arizona on Sunday night, where sort of faith and politics have come together in a way that was just quite alien in this.
I missed that. Sorry.
Well, no, it was a remark. It was more of a revival than a sort of than a funeral or a political rally.
A revival of what?
Of Christian faith and politics. Donald Trump, you've got a lot of similarities to Donald Trump. You both had near-death experiences in recent years.
Yeah, I haven't been assassinated.
I haven't,
as far as I know.
Yes. No, but you came pretty close to death's door during COVID.
Yeah.
Since Butler last year, Donald Trump started to talk about faith in his politics. Jesus and God is really there. Do you think there's room these days for that sort of conversation in politics? Do you see faith in Britain?
Look, I don't see. I think we're very bashful about it.
Yeah.
But you're asking me? Yeah. But I mean, I think the Church of England, which is insofar as I go to church, I go to a Church of England church, and I think it's a fantastic institution. But why haven't we got an Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment? What's going on?
And younger people are turning to the church in this country and in America.
Are they?
But they're not going. Yeah, there is evidence to show that there is youth involvement in religious activities on the increase, but they're not going to the Church of England.
Where are they? Yeah, so the point I was going to make.
And other denominations.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is, I think it's the Church of England, or the established church of this country, is a wonderful, wonderful institution. I was confirmed into it, and very occasionally go and worship them. I'm not brilliant at it, but what I sort of feel is religion. If you should basically think that if you have a religion, you should think that your religion is the right one and the true one.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's what people do. Yeah.
But we seem a bit bashful about saying that.
I think that's why that's such a contrast you see with Donald Trump now, who hasn't normally talked about his faith, suddenly talking about his faith in a way, and you see it in Reform. They're starting to talk about flags. I mean, family.
I think there's something rather wonderful about frankly, I think the ethical system of Christianity is about as good as it gets.
On that point,
and it's the right. It's the right answer, but whether the metaphysics are whether the metaphysics are wholly credible. I don't know, but
we'll discuss this in the break. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with Boris Johnson, and we're going to be talking about what we just mentioned there briefly: reform and immigration. Won't want to miss it. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. I'm still with Boris Johnson. We've covered God. We've covered pretty much everything. We've covered Ukraine. Okay. We've covered all sorts of things. Look, Boris Johnson, there is a reason you're in the news this week, and that is immigration. Nigel Farage, we're going to cover in a moment. But First of all, Donald Trump says that migration is ruining the planet. Is he right?
I think that you've got to be able to control it, and you've got to have everybody's entitled to have legal control of their borders. Every country is entitled to have that, and that was one of the most important things that people wanted out of leaving the European Union, and we've got that now. And just to anticipate your if I may for a second, your line of questioning or commentary. Look, people forget when they look at my time in office, or the Conservatives' time in office, that the year in which we had the lowest net immigration for 40 years was in fact my first full year in government. There's a very good reason for that, which was COVID. We then had a lot of people come in after COVID for all sorts of perfectly understandable reasons. But the key thing is that we had taken back full legal control. We can now have, if the government chooses, we can have zero legal immigration. Zero. Okay. But what we
didn't choose to do
what we have at the moment is a failure to control illegal immigration.
Well,
and that is, but actually thanks to Brexit, we can do that, because if you look at the cross-channel, the people coming across in the dinghy, in the boats, that's the thing that really drives the public nuts and drives me nuts. We have a solution to that, and it's the Rwanda solution. And it's painful, Harry. It's painful to see people now copying our idea. America's copying
the Italians,
and what this appalling Labour government should be doing is, instead of going off to Albania and being humiliated by Eddie Rama.
I was there. You're on, mate.
Begging the Albanians for a Rwanda solution. Well, we should do the Rwanda scheme. That is the way to fix
illegal migration.
That's the way to fix the illegal cross-channel migration. Stop all these people holding up in hotels while they're
we're well versed in the illegal migration debate, but Reform, Nigel Farage, are very much trying to put the legal migration debate on the table, and there are a lot of voters that look at, you know what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the graph. Here it is. The Boris wave, as they're calling it. What do you say to the Boris wave?
I say, look at the fall in legal migration caused by that took place in my first year of government, and it went to the lowest level for 40 years, and that was because of COVID. And we then had, and those figures are wrong, by the way. Your graph is rubbish.
They're not. This is non-EU. This is non-EU migration.
We then had, and so who are you going to kick out? The Ukrainians? You want to kick out the Ukrainians?
No.
You want to kick out the Hong Kong Chinese?
Well, look, the blue line is.
You want to kick out the nurses?
Boris,
who do you want to kick out?
Boris, the blue line
is all.
The blue line is all the non. The blue line is
entirely a function of COVID, and what we did was take back legal control.
You take back legal control, and as the reformer said, turn the taps on.
So the problems we face now are illegal migration, people coming across the channel illegally, and you need the Rwanda solution.
We've covered that.
That's the single biggest problem. And the other problem we have on the legal, actually we have a problem of emigration.
We've tried telling that to people who can't get their kids into a school, who can't get a doctor's appointment, whose children can't get jobs. They're being undercut.
We've got people fleeing this country at the moment.
Very rich people, because
of the taxes that Starmer is putting in, because of the mess that these guys are making of the UK economy.
Let's just talk about this.
And I haven't seen anything like it. I haven't seen anything like it since the 1970s.
This is your legacy on the line, though, because they are trying to Reform are trying to scapegoat you. They are trying to blame you entirely for legal matters. But your old colleagues, your old Tory colleagues, they aren't defending you.
I'm very, very proud of what we did, because we took back. We can have, if we want zero nurses, if we want nobody to come in for social care, if you want, we can have zero, right? That's our ability now. We have full legal control. What I'm saying, also thanks to Brexit, we are able to...
Do you think that's what people voted for? That graph, when people voted for Brexit, that's the numbers they wanted coming into this country?
What they voted for was full legal control, and that's what they got. And by the way, after COVID, we had, and this graph is wrong, but we had huge numbers of... It is. We had huge numbers of EU students who are coming back in. We had the Ukrainians, and I think people...
The yellow line is without the Ukrainians and the Hong Kongs. It's still pretty high.
People who make this point have got to say, who would you kick out? And I gather the policy
Reformers saying they would kick out. Reformers saying they would kick out. They would kick out a significant number of people who already have indefinite leave to remain.
Well,
what do you think of that?
Do you know what percentage of this city was born abroad?
I imagine pretty high.
Guess.
I at a guess off the top of my head, I'd say 35%.
It's more than 40% born abroad, right? And was.
And do you not see why people sometimes think that that's not necessarily a good thing?
And was when I was mayor, right? And indeed is helps to make it a very, very powerful
Boris,
and dynamic part of the UK economy.
Do you understand voters who some of them, a lot of them, don't think that's a good thing?
But of course, and that's why, thanks to Brexit, we can now have zero. We can have zero, thanks to what we did, we can have zero legal migration.
They're taking to the streets, Boris. They're raising flags. They're spraying roundabouts. They're marching.
Yes,
do you not understand what the anger is?
I do, and I think people are furious about the spectacle of a Labour government.
But they're blaming you.
No, a Labour government that absolutely refuses to do what it could to tackle illegal migration. And by the way, so they should be doing the Rwanda plan. They should be getting out of the ECHR. That actually doesn't make much difference to the small boats problem. You can send people back to Kigali anyway, or send people to Kigali, and they should be, in my view, they should be making greater use of Brexit powers to stop them. And instead, what you've got is a government that is committed to, as far as I understand it, to going back into some sort of free movement arrangement with the EU, whether it's for young people.
Well, let's cover that.
That is the problem. So you've got a government that is running.
I'll let you have a swing at the government.
Running this country so badly.
I want to talk about immigration still under the Tories.
I'm telling you what we achieved. What we achieved, and COVID was an utterly remarkable and exceptional set of circumstances under which we got immigration down to its lowest level for 40 years, and we then had a big bounce back, but we took full legal control.
After
I think
COVID,
people who
make
this point, and people forget what happened during COVID. They forget, for instance, that we had a huge hospital waiting list. We had to deal with that. We had shortages of lorry drivers, shortages of people to staff the shelves, and so on. And
so you opened up the floodgates and let people in, rather than Brits. After it could have been a moment of national. It could have been a moment of national renewal. It could have been a time to rebuild, time to step up and say, "This, let's rebuild this country."
Harry,
instead you imported a load of foreigners.
No, what it was a moment when, if you recall, we had the people couldn't get fuel. The inflation was taking off to double digits because of the problems we had in the supply chains, and frankly, there was a complete misunderstanding amongst a lot of the civil servants of the time about what the EU nationals had done. A lot of people thought, if you remember what happened with Brexit, a lot of people thought Britain's now a sort of leper colony. Everybody's
not quite. So that's the 5 million EU citizens who stayed here. Yeah.
They did, but if you remember, the rhetoric of the time was that they were all going to leave. Yeah, do you remember they were all going to leave, and it was the end. And so net immigration is the difference between two very big numbers, net inflows and net outflows.
And it's dramatically higher under your leadership.
And what happened was that, of course, people believed this nonsense about EU nationals and foreigners fleeing, but they didn't at all. And actually, what we were able to do as a result of Brexit was to take back
you're saying that a lot of
legal control.
EU citizens stayed and came back, and you'd relax the rules to make it easier for non-EU migrants to come to this country.
A lot of.
You're saying you got nothing? Would you have done anything different if you had your time again? Priti Patel, your Home Secretary, has apologised for her handling of Britain's borders.
I'm very proud that I'm very proud that we got immigration down in my first year to its lowest levels for 40 years. And I'm even prouder that as a result of the steps that we took, that this country has the legal ability to decide if it wants to have 0 people coming in. Now, I perfectly accept that in the difficulties that we faced with COVID, it wasn't because of the ambiguity about the numbers that we had in this country. Plus we had Ukraine, plus we had, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, right? And plus we had a lot of students coming back to complete their courses.
The yellow line is without the Ukrainians in Hong Kong, so it's still pretty high.
But then it includes the EU students coming back. These are hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people. And that is basically
Boris,
what happened.
And
what I think people need to recognise is that government that I led and Priti was in, that government, against the teeth of opposition from every other party in Parliament, got Brexit done so that we have the legal ability to control immigration. And by the way, let me just say, since you talk about this other party
why are people
that sees fit to slag me off the whole time?
Why are people
and seem so obsessed with me? Let me tell you another myth.
No, my turn. If everything was so tickety-boo, if you got everything right and everything's understandable and explainable...
I tell you something.
Let me get a word in. If everything was so tickety-boo, why are people flocking to reform? Why are Tories flocking to reform? Why are your closest allies, Jake Berry, Nadine Dorries, Angela Jenkins, ministers in your government have gone to reform?
My dear fellow, the answer is staring you in the face.
Why?
Well, because, unfortunately, the party that you mentioned,
Reform.
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 Whatever
you know what they're called.
It was on 0% when I was Prime Minister, right? And the other thing I would say, because they like to say, they were.
But they're on 31% now, and the Tories are in the toilet.
Mile through, they were on 0%. And that was because we got Brexit done, and we would fix this problem. We would have completely solved the... look, COVID was a big problem. We were flying blind, but we would have fixed it.
So getting rid of you was the problem.
Frankly, yes. And I remind you of another point, by the way, because these guys claim, I think they claim that the 2019 election was only won thanks to their magnanimity.
Well, they stood down a lot of candidates in Tory-facing seats.
Have you actually looked at the polls?
I've looked at enough of the numbers to know that they gave you a pretty hefty majority.
No, they didn't. They were. I just looked back in the months leading up to that election, and it never changed. They were on about 2 to 4%. That's margin of error stuff. If those votes are evenly distributed between parties, which they would have been.
Bygones be bygones. No, they're not on.
So what I'm saying to you is, I don't care. My big answer, I don't give. I'm very proud of what we did. We got Brexit done. We have brilliant plans that we could. This government should be enacting the Rwanda scheme. That is what they should be doing.
You
say you've got that, but we should be campaigning on it. And
you say you don't care, but Reform are in the 30s, the Tories are in the teens. You know, the government's approval ratings on the floor. People are taking to the streets. They're protesting. The Epping mums, the flags are flying. The Unite the Kingdom rally marching through London. Yes, it was organised by the far right, but not all 150,000 people there.
And I totally
Something is happening out there, right?
And I agree. And I understand.
But why is it? But then why does Nigel Farage say he wants nothing to do with you, and it's all your fault?
Because you must ask him that.
I have.
Well, whatever. But look, I think the answer to that, and the answer for the reason why people are so angry is because they see a government that is absolutely refusing to address the things that are making them sorry. They're seeing people still coming across in huge numbers, claiming asylum. Going into asylum hostels, going into hotels.
Yeah, we know. We're well versed.
But you're asking me why people are angry, right? And I'm giving you the reason. And there is a solution to that, and that is to make sure that when they arrive in Kent, they are bounced straight to Kigali.
If it ever got through the legal ramifications.
But it would. It
Fine.
would. And I think it was, I think, frankly, I think we should have hung on and delivered that. And I think the government today should swallow its pride and get Rwanda done.
Do you think the
Get Rwanda done? That's my
Tory
policy.
party, though, I mean, it's in a pretty dire strait. Danny Kruger, your own political secretary, a perfect example. Danny Kruger, well-respected, thoughtful, MP, has now defected to Reform, saying the Tory party is dead. Is it dead?
The answers
Tory
to
party
this
dead.
country's problems.
Is the Tory party dead?
Of course not.
Is it on life support?
Look, the answer to this country's problems...
Is it unwell?
The answer to this country's problems are going to be conservative answers. Okay, Harry? Because the problems that this country faces are an economy. We've got unemployment rising again. We've got a long-term interest rates. We've got yields on British government debt at a 30-year high. We've got people fleeing this country, investors fleeing this country. We're going to need a pro-growth, pro-enterprise Conservative government. I also happen to think that in a situation, to go back to where we started our conversation, in a world which is uncertain because of Putin's aggression, and with threats to Eastern Europe, threats to NATO countries, we're going to need a Conservative government that is strong on defence and doesn't believe, to take a position at random, that the problem in Ukraine was that NATO provoked Putin.
You're talking about Nigel Farage.
Which I think is not right.
You're talking about Nigel Farage.
I believe there's a leader of another party that takes that view. I don't think that's right. And I think that's extremely dangerous.
Nadine Dorries
I think that's extremely dangerous because I think the idea of suggesting that the Ukrainians are somehow to blame for the invasion, or the NATO's to blame, is an absolute inversion of the truth.
Nadine Dorries
unless we're clear about that and we're determined about that, we will not succeed. And Harry, if we want to save the West, we want to stand up for NATO, stand up for freedom, and not go around truckling to Putin and suggesting that he's got a point.
Nadine Dorries, we're going to move on in a second, but Nadine Dorries says that the Tories, and possibly under you, she wants you to come back. She always has done. She's one of your biggest cheerleaders. The Tories need to do a deal with Reform, do a deal with Farage.
No, I mean, I think the Conservative Party is the oldest, most successful political party in the world. It will come back. I think the answer...
Sometimes it takes a generation, though.
The answer to the country's problems are going to be Conservative answers. And we have to tackle migration, we have full control of our borders. We have full legal control. We need, as a country, to implement the Rwanda scheme ASAP and stop the cross-channel traffic. On the economy, we've got a very difficult situation in which the welfare state is ballooning.
Yeah.
Mental health care bills are out of control. I was very disappointed the other day to see this new party, the party that was on zero when I was Prime Minister.
We're still talking about reform. Reform. Just say reform. Say the word reform.
Reform. The party that was on zero when I was Prime Minister.
Our American listeners and viewers are going to be mind-boggled.
The party that was on zero when I was Prime Minister, saying that they don't want to remove the. They want to keep the. They don't want to keep the. They don't want to keep the two-child. The two-child. The cap on benefits for families with more than 2 children. That's ridiculous. How are we supposed to explain to hard-working people that their neighbours can take more and more money from the state? And we've got to reform welfare. We've got to spend less on public servants. The number of people in the public sector is now at an absolute all-time high. We're now 4 years since COVID.
These were all problems.
It's all out there. But it's time radically to start.
We're running out of time.
That is the way to cut taxes. What I'm saying to you, Harry, is the answers to UK's problem are going to be conservative.
Right. Is Kemi Badenoch the Conservative?
It will be conservative answers that save the West.
Is Kemi Badenoch the right leader to give those conservative answers?
Yes, of course she is. I think she's.
Sounds like you fancy a little tickle.
No. I think she's easily the sparkiest and the most intellectually original of the leaders, of the party leaders at the moment, and she has the right ideas. And look, 4 years is a long time, or how long there is till the next election.
Would you have beaten Keir Starmer last summer?
I'm convinced I would have beaten him, yes. But, you know, that's the... And as I say, look, we would have...
Could you beat him in 4 years' time?
Look, I'm have a very happy life with...
What are you up to? What are you doing? What are you up to? Are you still painting? Are you still painting buses?
Many things for which I'm very thankful. Many things for which I'm very thankful. And, you know, I've got to get on with all of those.
So no comeback. You don't miss the arena.
I've got to get. Oh, I come on your show.
Oh, here you are.
Out of sheer, you know, because I missed the last one.
Could you beat Nigel Farage? Are you the man to beat Nigel Farage? Does the Tory party need you?
Who is to say who is going to be whether, you know, that party will even exist?
Reform.
The next. That's right. You know, they have a great big puffball. I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you right now.
Let's see.
But Farage is quite an operator, though, isn't he?
I think. Well, you know, my concerns, as I say, and they're serious concerns, are about the approach to the economy of the Reform Party and the approach on national security. And I think both of those will be severely tested in the years ahead, and people will actually want serious answers. And I think that the answers are going to be Conservative answers.
So Farage is either a joke or a threat to national security, or both? Which one is it?
I think, as I say, I think there are two real priorities for us now. The number one is the economy, and making sure that we shrink the size of the state and public spending.
It's not the question I asked, but is Nigel Farage a threat?
And the second,
you're saying it's a threat to national security.
The second is defence and national security, and the threat of Russia. And on both of those, I have very serious anxieties.
And Nigel Farage is a threat to national security.
I have serious anxieties. I'm putting it in Diplo speak, right?
I
have serious anxieties.
You're a former journalist. I want it as an intro, not diplomatic waffle.
I think I'm. Look at what's happening in Moldova, right? Mm-hmm. Look at what's happening in Estonia, in Poland, even in Denmark today, right? And ask yourself, do you want the UK either to be led by Labour, who have a huge number of their grassroots who are still basically pro-Moscow, Corbynista, right? Or do you want this reform gang who are on record as saying that NATO provoked Putin's aggression? I don't think that's I think what the world wants to save the West. What the world needs is UK leadership on this, and they need the UK to be strong and determined, and not to sound equivocal, morally equivocal about transparent evil like invading Ukraine.
And one final time, that leadership will or won't be coming from Boris Johnson again.
No, look, I'm as I say, I'm very
go on. I'll have one more go.
I'm very happily. I've got a book I've got to finish. I've got all sorts of stuff.
We better let you go back to.
I'm very grateful to you for having me on your show.
Not at all. Thank you, Boris Johnson. Thank you very much for joining us on Save the West.
Thank you so much.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to pick all that apart with our expert panel next. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Joining me now after our interview with Boris Johnson is our expert panel. Sir Simon Clarke, who served in Boris Johnson's government, Kate Ferguson, the Sun on Sunday's brilliant political editor, and the titan of breakfast TV, Mike Graham. Who's first? Kate, right.
Ladies first.
Of course, ladies first. They are trying to bury Boris Johnson like some sort of vampire from beyond the grave. They don't want him to come back. Nigel Farage is really putting the boot in, jumping on the Boris wave. Boris hit back there, and he's not going to go down without a fight, is he?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Nigel Farage does not want Boris Johnson anywhere near the political turf, right? He's well ahead in the polls, enjoying it. Kemi's not putting up too much of a fight, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a minute, Simon. And they just want to to basically keep Boris dead and buried. And how are they doing that? They're trying to hammer him on immigration.
Boris talks about Rwanda as if it wasn't something that could be stopped. I mean, Rwanda didn't work. And the reason it didn't work was partly because Rishi Sunak decided to have an early election. They didn't get a chance to work. However, you know as well as I do that if it had gone through, everybody they would have been the same as the Labour Party now. They would have been stopped from sending anybody. They'd send 4 people, and that would be it. And also, you talk about them not being conservative at reform, but I mean, the Conservative Party that you were a cabinet member of raised taxes to the highest level since the Second World War. That's not conservative. They locked people down. That wasn't conservative. The only way that you could move across the channel during COVID was on a small dinghy.
Let's talk about Mike's point, though. So, it's like 2 people having a fight at a car park, and the Tory party are sort of standing there going, "Leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it." They're not. No one's even listening to the Tory party.
Well, at some point, it'll be realised that we're the ones who.
I don't know what that metaphor was.
We're the one.
It kind of works in my head.
I like the fact because it means that we're the ones who are sober, or at least more sober. And look, I get it, right? There is a massive rebuilding job to do, and part of the reason I'm onward is to try and work out how we put forward a plan on all the things that matter. So the border, and Kemi will, I'm sure, announce at conference. Party politics has moved. And party policy, rather, has moved to leaving the ECHR. That is critical. It's what I called for.
It's taken far too long to do that, hasn't it? No one's listening anymore.
Is the public listening?
No one is listening to what they're saying. And, it's not because they're mean, but it's because you've totally vacated the pitch. It's just true that under Kemi Badenoch's leadership, it takes a year to say anything. Well, guess what? Nigel Farage is out there stealing your voters. And
eating your breakfast.
Eating your breakfast, thank you very much. This just feels so incremental
but the 3 bears are returning to see Goldilocks now, OK? And I think...
Have we dropped acid in this? What is going on?
We are coming back, and I think we'll get lots of announcements.
The bears are fighting in the car park. Goldilocks is crying.
We're the bears.
Guys,
Farage is Goldilocks.
All right, OK, I've been looking at that graph too long. The Boris wave has had effects on me. Guys, just very quickly, Mike Graham, has Boris Johnson improved his chances in standing, yes or no?
I don't think he has.
Okay, any closer to come back? Has he done enough to see off Farage, called him a threat to national security?
No closer to a comeback today.
So Simon Clarke, if Boris Johnson announced he did want to run and lead the Tory party into the next election, should Kemi stand aside for him?
Kemi is the leader of the Conservative Party, and
that's a stated fact.
And we need together to show the public that we are not a circus, right? But fundamentally, do I think that Boris Johnson could, if he wants it, have a significant role to play in British politics in the future? Of course he could. And as someone who will always count him as a friend, I would welcome that.
He's got 3 bears and he's not a circus.
Vote Conservative, we're not a circus. I think the messaging needs a little...
Other words could be said to this government, is all I can say to that.
Let's call a day to this before things get any weirder. So Simon Clarke from Onwards, thank you very much. Kate Ferguson from The Sun on Sunday, thank you very much. Mike Graham, I will see you in the morning on your show, Morning Glory on talkTV.
Look forward to it.
That was a bumper Harry Cole Saves the West, with all the biggest names come to launder their reputations and try and spin their way out of trouble. So remember to subscribe on YouTube. Harry Cole Saves the West. We'll be back in DC next week. See you then.